Welcome to the Meltdown Podcast. I'm joined today by Lauren Conlin, the East Coast contributor for LA Mag. We're going to discuss everything regarding the Alexander brothers trial. Lauren, thank you so much for taking the time.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
So I've done my best to try to review all the transcripts and everything. Today is day 6. I've only seen days 1 through 5 transcripts, but as someone who's been in the courtroom on multiple days, how can you describe the atmosphere in the room?
You know, it's interesting. I've been to the trial about 3 times now, and I have a hard time not comparing it to the Diddy trial. It's literally in the same exact courtroom, the same building, and there's some of the same lawyers, Mark Agnifilo and Tenny Garagos, who were essentially Diddy's first and second chair, are representing Orrin Alexander. It's sex trafficking, so I have been making these comparisons, and there are a lot of parallels. However, the feeling inside the courtroom is much different, and it's interesting because I've kind of said this in some of my short videos. The brothers, Orrin, Tal, and Alone, they didn't have relationships with these women. And when I say relationships, I mean, they weren't long-term relationships where there's lots of texting, lots of emails, like Diddy and Cassie or Diddy and Jane. They were in relationships. So as bad of a guy as Diddy is, we got to see a little bit of his humanity, and we got to see him as a human being in some of these texts where, you can see some remorse, you can see some, just characteristics that I feel like a jury would be receptive to. Now, in turn, for the Alexander brothers, you got nothing. I mean, we're talking like we're seeing emails where these guys are calling these women, cheap hookers, essentially. So there's no humanity so far that I've seen in this case. So I'm just, and I guess I'm speaking from a perspective of maybe their attorneys, the brothers' attorneys, where it's like, what is your defense here? I don't even it's very clear in the courtroom, the defense is really centering around the fact that nothing was really written down, nothing was documented, in terms of, nothing. If a woman said she was drugged and assaulted, there's no police record, there's no, they didn't get a drug test. It's like we're just telling you from our memory. However, being there and seeing this testimony, I mean, it's pretty clear the witnesses that I've seen are traumatized. I mean, and I don't mean to laugh. I should just say that I have a face that looks happy a lot, I guess, and so I always have to say I'm not smiling at this. It's just my face.
No, of course.
Yeah, but no, they look traumatized, and the witness that I saw the other day, she would be called out for not remembering details, certain details about that night. Her memory would be refreshed from the government if they would show her something, whatever, and she was getting hammered pretty hard. By the defense attorney, which it's their job. And she would say, these details are insignificant. All I remember is the most important part, that I was drugged and I was raped and it traumatized me. And so I think if a jury hears that enough times from enough women, what are they going to be looking for receipts? Are they going to be looking for, I don't think so. I don't think so.
And I think that there's a, certainly people are very careful because there's no such thing as a perfect victim. And of course, you don't want to victim shame or try to minimize the experience that someone allegedly had. It's very challenging. And I spoke about this earlier today. It's very hard to actually analyze some of the stories on its face without being seen or perceived as somehow dismissive. I'm in no way trying to dismiss any of the allegations. The question is that, like, do the stories make sense? And is the trafficking charge, is there evidence of trafficking? Like, did you get a sense that there was a legitimate trafficking scheme as you're sitting in the courtroom?
So it's really interesting that you bring that up. So that's tough in terms of, you're talking about a conspiracy. I don't think a conspiracy is going to necessarily be easy to prove here, because they're saying, the government saying a conspiracy, it lasted with the brothers from 2008 to 2021. they made a comment, the defense made a comment like, "Tall, there's no alleged, misconduct from him after 2014, so what is this conspiracy?" I think the thing is, you know, federal charges are tough. They're very interesting. Even with Luigi Mangione and the only murder charge being dropped against him last week, people are up in arms. But what they don't realize is there's no standalone murder charge in federal court. It's usually under a predicate or an element of like racketeering. And then you've got, the predicate acts, which could be arson, murder, whatever. So, like with Luigi, it's like, well, the interstate stalking resulting in death, that carries a life sentence. So that's your charge right there. It's much different than state. So of course, I think that the Alexander brothers, if their case was brought to a state level within the statute of limitations that some of these women are alleging, that would have been a much easier case to prove. Slam dunk, right? Maybe not slam dunk, but you know what I mean. So now you've got sex trafficking where you have to prove that these women were coerced by fraud, force, or coercion to engage in these commercial sexual acts. Now, the only way I see this being possible right now, after being inside the courtroom, I don't see fraud. I don't see these promises of saying, "Hey, if you come to the Hamptons, I'm going to give you XYZ. We're going to do XYZ." It's very obvious that their lifestyles are out there. They don't really have to say that. The
I mean,
coercion,
they had film crews with them almost all the time, right? Their whole life was on Instagram. In the
right?
2019 profile on The Real Deal, cracking the bro code, The Real Deal actually promoted that they had featured them in 431 articles since I think 2009. So like it's not Epstein where they're hiding and nobody knows who's been to the islands. Let's see the list. Like it was way out there, right? So
Well,
what you're
yeah, and
talking
actually, one of the videos in court, I didn't see it. We saw a couple stills from it, but they had a stipulation from like a production company that I think it was like Lifestyle. I forget what it was. I
right,
had it written
lifestyle
yeah,
productions,
yeah. Okay, there you
and
go.
they
Yeah,
have drone videos. They have
yeah.
it looks like something out of a 1990s MTV like video.
Well, the defense was using that because they had footage from a party where the witness was like, "I wasn't drinking. I was drinking mocktails." And then they would pause and be like, "Well, what are you holding? What is that?" And so they had this. But, just closing the loop on the conspiracy of trafficking or whatever, I think where they stand a chance to secure a jury here and secure a conviction, I should say, is the coercion. And you only need to prove one of those, by the way, force, fraud, or coercion, not all three. The coercion, if they can prove that, would be the drugs. That is, if they can prove that these women were drugged, which it could be hard because you just have these women telling you, and that's it. And not that that's so bad. I'm just saying you've got a jury
But can I
with
can I ask you a technical question on this? You might
yeah,
not know the answer, but
yeah.
when we talk about drugged, right? The first woman who testified under a pseudonym with Zac Efron's apartment, she
Mhm,
said that she drank wine and then she was offered Molly by Tall Alexander, and
mhm.
then she had a mixed drink, I believe, in a club, and then was R-worded by Alone. So when you're talking about drugged, does
I
someone
don't mean that.
voluntarily
I
Right.
don't
So it's
mean
not
that.
even
Yeah.
right. So it's not talking about if they voluntarily take drugs.
No, no,
Right.
and that's
Right.
that's the thing. That's what will muck up the testimony, or I should say the conviction, is if you have someone saying, "Yeah, well, I did take Molly and that is willingly." That's not necessarily coercion. You're being offered it, you take it. I'm talking about the girl, Bella Koval on the stand the other day who says, "I don't really drink. I don't, I had mocktails. I'll take a few sips, but I'm telling you right now, I took a sip of a drink and all of a sudden I could not move my arms and my legs." And that right there, if they can prove that beyond a reasonable doubt, then that right there could be coercion. However, again, it's like it's obvious. I hate when I have to say this. It's going to depend on the jury. Like obviously it is, but I
Right.
really mean it. Like it's another thing is like when I talk about the humanity here, where it's like, okay, maybe if they're on the the brink of saying, "We don't know." I mean, all these girls are saying very similar things about the drugging, but it's tough to prove. And then if you had maybe some emails between them where these brothers seem to care, like you saw with Diddy, like, you would just see these caring emails that would sort of make you go, "Oh, maybe he's not so bad." Like every once in a while. And again, we haven't seen any of that. And in the courtroom, I just don't think they look like I think Tall looks a little bit um like kind of worried. He seems to me to be like very serious, very worried, kind of has his head down, whatever. I just think like the twins, could be a little bit humbled, if you will, in the courtroom. I just don't I just feel like I don't know. I don't see a lot of I don't feel anything for anybody except for right now, except for the witnesses. And, I'm a human being. I will say that. So a lot of people can come out and say, well, you were in the courtroom with Diddy. He's a piece of shit, whatever. And like, yes, totally. But you don't understand. Like his family, when his children are in there, it's so strange, and I am not giving that guy a pass. Like I am not. I had to watch the Cassie video over and over and over again, and it haunts me. I'm just, I guess I'm just trying to say that there is something, and not in a murder case, don't get me wrong here, but there's just something sitting in the courtroom with the defendant day after day for months, and months, and seeing their children all the time. You do sort of say, okay, maybe they're sorry, I don't know, but right now I don't see that at
And
all.
the problem that they have there is that, I'm in South Florida. They weren't nice to people in business necessarily. They
Right.
weren't nice interpersonally. They weren't people that went out of their way to help others all of the time. So
Yeah.
I know someone that had emailed Oren about a business deal or trying to learn from him probably a dozen times and never got a response. So that's kind of the personality. But I'll say in their defense, like that doesn't mean that they had a conspiracy to sex traffic. And
No.
I think
I
that's
don't
where,
think there was a
yeah,
conspiracy either, Daniel.
yeah.
I don't, and I think that's the tough part with these federal cases right now, where it's like they they're trying to get these guys because the statute of limitations has passed on the state charges, and so they're trying to make sex trafficking just like the new rape charge, I guess.
Because
And it
like, let's put it this way.
yeah,
You brought up the cheap hookers email that Tall forwarded to his
yeah.
brothers or one of the brothers, right?
Mhm.
If we're gonna go and subpoena how people on a college campus were talk about women who were coming over to watch a football game or coming over for a party, I think there's a lot of very high profile executives and people that now are married with children or functioning as grown adults that would be mortified to have
Yeah,
their emails subpoenaed. So this is not an
totally.
excuse, but from my sense of reading the transcripts, it doesn't even seem like the defense is trying to defend any of these brothers as nice people. So,
No.
do you think that the jury is able to see, like, do you think that that kind of email, when the jury sees it, that it plays to a conspiracy, or do you think that they're able to
No.
see that these guys are just bad dudes?
I don't think it plays in the jury's mind to a conspiracy. However, the judge's charges are going to be really important when they read them, or when she reads them to the jury, because they really have to understand what, the elements have to be met for them to convict these guys. And these guys are looking at a lot here. So even yesterday when the judge was telling Tenny Garagos to basically hurry up with her cross, Tenny was kind of like, "Your Honor, this right here, this witness alone is a minimum of 15 years each. I need to cross-examine. Like, I need my time." And that's another thing. The judge she's tough. I mean,
She seems tough. Just in the transcript, it seems extremely tough. I'll also add that I was confused reading the transcript from yesterday when
mhm,
the alleged victim is talking about how she felt pressured to go on a boat with the brothers to meet their itinerary. I said,
it was
"You were invited out there," and she goes, "I was just expecting essentially the private chef. I wasn't expecting to have to do extreme." Like,
yeah,
what are we talking about?
it got well, they got into the weeds, and that's kind of what had to be done to sort of elicit this cross-examination, because I think, they're trying to slowly X out the whole force right? I didn't force you to come here. We were communicating through your friend Allison, or Allison was communicating with one of the brothers to plan this trip. Okay, let's cross out the force. The fraud. Like, what did we promise you? We didn't promise you anything. We told you, sure, there'd be a chef, there'd be whatever. So they're slowly crossing this out while also trying to undermine her credibility. So a big thing there was she felt like she had to go on the boat. She had to
Yeah, but
drink. And
that's not force. That's saying she wanted. Yeah, right.
right. And so part of this was like that video where where they were pausing it and saying, "Well, you felt like you had to be drinking," because she was holding a drink, and it looked like some of them looked like juice, some of it looked like rosé, whatever. She said she felt like she had to, and then the defense attorney Tenny Garagos pointed out, she's like, "Well, look at the background of this picture. Do you see that guy holding a drink? Do you see that guy holding a drink? Do you think that girl? No, they're not holding drinks. Why did you feel? It's just that's what they do, the defense attorneys. So, like I said, I think the biggest thing to overcome is the coercion with the drugs. I think that is the biggest thing. So you're right. Like Katie Moore, that will be tough because she took ecstasy willingly. And by the way, I want to also just say, I'm not saying this never happened to any of these women. I'm talking specifically legally. Like you know what I mean?
No,
I'm
no, of
talking
course. And by
inside
the
a
way,
courtroom.
that's one of the things I'm really struggling about, because you try
Yeah.
to discuss the case in terms of the legal bar for what they're being attacked. And God forbid, I'm not trying to undermine any of the witnesses. I'm just saying, if you read something like yesterday, one of the outcry witnesses said that her friend had called her and said that Orrin had R-worded her,
Yes.
but the alleged victim said that Alone did it. So you're
Yeah.
talking about two different people. That's a fundamental challenge to the strength of the case. That does not mean that this person didn't potentially undergo or experience something that was
Of
horrendous,
course.
or that they
Of
weren't
course.
like. So I feel like you have to keep saying it, because what happens is that if someone doesn't pay attention to 2 minutes of the podcast, then they're going to come back and say, "Oh my God, you're
I
victim
know.
shaming," and that's not at all what's going on. So what,
Absolutely not.
if the government can't get there on the trafficking, like, what's left?
I mean, so it's tough. So there's other charges that, the sexual exploitation of a minor, for example, and this one is also being contested because of this birth certificate. It's a Ukrainian or a Russian birth certificate, I believe, that was issued 2 months after Amelia was born, and this is the 17-year-old that Orrin filmed in 2009, who didn't even know, by the way, that she was a victim here. She had no idea, and she never reached out to the government. They had reached out to her to testify. So I feel really bad for her, because I think she was kind of like, I just want to move on with my life. Like, I was much different then. Um, but
She had no recollection of this either, right?
no, she
So
had no.
how did they identify her?
I don't know exactly how
Well,
that happened. I think possibly the defense may have helped with that, but I'm not certain. But no, if and they haven't made or the judge has not made a ruling on this birth certificate yet. There was some really interesting case law that was cited about, a passport, or a European passport that wasn't authentic or something. So it'll be interesting, because if the judge deems that this is not a valid birth certificate, and I think the whole argument also is like, well, she was like 17 and 11 months. So it's like this 1 month difference. If they can get that thrown out, then that charge would be thrown out. So then there's an aggravated assault on a cruise ship as well. That's under, a predicate act of that. So there's a bunch. There's a lot of different charges, but it just goes back to sort of like what you said. I'm not saying that this didn't happen to anyone at all. I am not saying that. I believe these women. I really wholeheartedly do, I have to say. But the trafficking is I think it's tough if they can't prove the element of coercion with the drugs. I think that would be difficult.
and also,
So
just sitting there in the courtroom, looking at Orrin, Alone, and Tall, do you think that they're capable of running a allegedly international drug or prostitution ring? I mean, do they strike you as people that are
I don't think it's
even
about
capable of this.
it's not even about a prostitution ring. That's not there's no, Mann Act stuff alleged, but I know what you're saying.
No,
No,
but
it's
I shouldn't have used the word prostitution. I'm saying like
yeah.
I don't, to me, based on the people that I've spoken to and based on what I've seen,
Mhm.
I don't find them to be capable of running what the government is alleging them to have done. That said, I'm not saying that they're good people, nor am I saying that they didn't do things to women. It's just
Yeah, they don't seem like good people. Truly. They don't. They definitely don't seem like good people. However, I think the difference is, we th- we are looking at this, or not we, but like maybe you're looking at this like it is some kind of like mafia conspiracy that they were like running this. I don't think the government is even looking at it like that. I think they're looking at it like that these guys, they, got their drugs and they conspired to take advantage of women, and the definition of that, sexually, the definition is trafficking at this point. So it's a commercial sex act by force, fraud, or coercion. So yeah, I think again, just it's looking at them in court, like I said, they don't seem like they fully grasp like what is happening, I would say, just because it's like, that's me. I'm going into court and I'm just gonna be like, ugh, I'm like not even gonna make eye contact with anyone. I am just
well,
going
they're not wearing ties, right?
no, they're not wearing
Right.
ties.
Bold move.
Yeah, their parents are there every day. I mean, I would kind of look at his mom or their mom sometimes when I hear some of the witnesses talking, and I'm just like, she doesn't even like she shows no emotion. She's emotionless. I'm just like, man, this is my kids or these are my sons. Yeah.
No, something's definitely off in what they were doing. And again,
Yeah.
we talked about how the government sees it versus other people, and I think I'd love to have you on again sometime soon. Just for me, one of the other stories about this, and I'm working on an article about it, is just the media, because like I said, the Real Deal featured them 400 plus times. They were everywhere. So it's a little hard for me to reconcile the level of publicity they received versus what they're alleged to have done. Who was quiet? Why were they quiet? And how did it get to the point that these people were allowed to just be so disrespectful and there was no accountability until a decade later? That to
I
me
know.
is a different story.
I
But
I agree with you. Yeah, we'll see. I'm probably not going to get to go in another again this week. I'll probably be in next week. So,
all right,
yeah.
so we'll touch base and
Yeah.
hopefully can have you back. I
Yeah,
appreciate your time.
of course. Thank you so much.